They mocked her weight and gave her away until a Lakota man called her his bride. Adeline stood frozen as her father shook hands with the tall warrior, sealing her fate lest she was nothing more than unwanted cattle. The townspeople whispered and pointed, their cruel laughter following her as Chayton led her away from everything she had ever known. The dusty streets of Cedar Ridge have never been kind to Adeline. Every morning brought the same stares and whispers from neighbors who saw her size before they saw her soul. Her father, Thomas, owned the general store, and his disappointment in his daughter grew heavier with each passing year. At 23, she remained unmarried, and in his eyes, that made her worthless. The other young women in town had found husbands by 17 or 18, but no man wanted a wife who looked like Adeline. Her father reminded her of this daily, his words cutting deeper than any knife could. The morning everything changed. Started like any other. Adeline swept the store floors while her father counted money at the counter. A group of Lakota warriors entered, looking to trade furs for supplies. Their leader, Chayton, stood taller than the rest, his dark eyes taking in everything around him. Thomas saw an opportunity. He had been trying to expand his trading routes into Lakota territory for months, but the tribe remained wary of white merchants. As they negotiated, Thomas glanced at his daughter and made a decision that would change everything. The deal was simple and cruel. Thomas would get exclusive trading rights with the Lakota, and in return, he would give them his daughter. Not as a slave, he assured Chayton, but as a wife. The warrior studied Adeline for a long moment. She expected to see the same disgust in his eyes that she saw in every other man, but his expression remained unreadable. After what felt like hours, Chayton nodded. The deal was done. Adeline wanted to scream, to run, to beg her father not to do this, but the words stuck in her throat. Her father had finally found a way to rid himself of his burden. The townspeople gathered to watch as she climbed onto the back of Chayton's horse, their faces filled with mock sympathy and secret relief. Good riddance to the fat girl, their eyes seemed to say. At least now she was someone else's problem. The journey to the Lakota village took 3 days. Adeline rode behind Chayton, her arms wrapped around his waist, terrified of what awaited her. She expected him to treat her cruelly, to mock her like everyone else had. Instead, he remained quiet, stopping regularly to let her rest, and making sure she had water. When they camped at night, he gave her the warmest blanket and built the fire close enough to keep her comfortable. His kindness confused her more than cruelty would have. The Lakota village appeared through the morning mist on the 4th day. Dozens of teepees stood in neat circles, smoke rising from their tops. Children ran between them, laughing and playing games. Women worked together, preparing food and tanning hides. Men tended to horses and sharpened weapons. It was nothing like Cedar Ridge, where everyone kept to themselves, and judgment lurked behind every door. The villagers stopped their work to stare as Chayton led her into camp. Adeline braced herself for the pointing and laughter she knew would come. Instead, she saw only curiosity. The women studied her pale skin and strange clothes, while the children hid behind their mothers, peeking out with wide eyes. No one laughed, no one whispered cruel words. They simply watched and waited. Chayton's teepee stood near the center of the village. He showed her inside, pointing to where she would sleep and where to store her few belongings. Through broken English and gestures, he explained that she would need to learn their ways if she wanted to survive here. The soft hands that had only known store work would need to become strong. The skills her mother had taught her about being a proper lady would be useless here. The first weeks were harder than anything Adeline had ever experienced. The Lakota women showed her how to carry water from the stream, but the heavy buffalo bladder bags made her arms shake and her back ache. They taught her to scrape hides, but her soft hands blistered and bled. She tried to help with cooking, but she burned the meat and ruined the wild root stew. Every night she collapsed in the teepee, feeling more useless than she ever had in Cedar Ridge. Chayton watched her struggles without judgment. When her hands bled, he showed her how to make a healing salve from prairie plants. When she cried from exhaustion, he didn't mock her tears. Instead, he sat beside her and spoke in his language, his voice calm and steady. She didn't understand the words, but the tone soothed her. Slowly, he began teaching her simple Lakota phrases, patient when she stumbled over the unfamiliar sounds. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Chayton surprised her by speaking more English than she thought he knew. He told her that in his culture, a woman with a strong body was considered blessed. It meant she could survive harsh winters and bear healthy children. It meant she could work hard and contribute to the tribe's survival. Her size, which had brought her nothing but shame in Cedar Ridge, was seen as strength here. For the first time in her life, Adeline felt tears of something other than sadness. As the weeks turned into months, Adeline grew stronger. Her hands hardened, and she could carry water without stopping to rest. She learned which plants were safe to eat and which ones could heal various ailments. The women began to accept her, teaching her to bead and sew with sinew. They shared stories around the fire, and even though Adeline only understood some words, she felt included in a way she never had before. The turning point came during the first frost of autumn. A young boy named Little Fox fell ill with a burning fever. The tribe's healer, an elderly woman named White Crow, tried every remedy she knew, but the fever wouldn't break. The boy's mother wept as her son grew weaker. Adeline watched, remembering something her grandmother had taught her years ago, a remedy using willow bark and elderflower that had saved her cousin from a similar fever. She approached White Crow hesitantly, using her limited Lakota and gestures to explain. The healer was skeptical, but desperate. Together they prepared the remedy, combining Adeline's grandmother's recipe with herbs Chayton had taught her to identify. They applied the poultice to Little Fox's chest and gave him tea made from the mixture. Through the night, they kept vigil, replacing the poultice and giving him sips of tea. By morning, the fever broke. Little Fox opened his eyes and asked for water. His mother sobbed with relief, embracing Adeline and calling her sister. White Crow nodded her approval, and word spread through the village. The white woman had saved Little Fox. She had brought medicine knowledge that even White Crow didn't know. From that day forward, Adeline was no longer an outsider. She was one of them. Chayton's pride in her was clear. He began spending more time with her, teaching her to ride and showing her secret places where medicinal plants grew. He told her stories of his people, their history and beliefs. In return, she shared what she remembered of her grandmother's remedies and stories from her own childhood, though she left out the painful parts. Their conversations grew longer, their silences more comfortable. Winter arrived with brutal force, but Adeline was ready. She had learned to prepare pemmican and dry meat for storage. She could keep a fire burning through the coldest nights and repair tears in the tipi covering. The extra weight she carried kept her warm when others shivered. She worked alongside the other women, sharing the labor and the laughter. For the first time in her life, she felt useful, valued, and part of something bigger than herself. Spring brought unexpected visitors. A group of white men appeared at the edge of the village, and Adeline's blood ran cold when she recognized her father among them. He had brought the sheriff and 3 other men from Cedar Ridge. They demanded to speak with her, claiming she had been kidnapped and held against her will. Her father's face was red with anger, but she saw something else there too: wounded pride. The confrontation happened in the center of the village, with the entire tribe watching. Thomas pointed at his daughter, his voice loud and harsh. He claimed Chayton had bewitched her, that no daughter of his would choose to live among savages. He demanded she return immediately, saying the deal was invalid because these people had corrupted her mind. The sheriff looked uncomfortable but stood beside Thomas, his hand resting on his gun. Adeline stepped forward, and the woman who faced her father was not the one who had left Cedar Ridge months ago. She stood tall, her voice steady and clear. She told him that she was exactly where she wanted to be. She had found a family here, people who saw her worth beyond her appearance. She had found respect, purpose, and love. The punishment he had intended for her had become her salvation. Chayton moved to stand beside her, his presence solid and protective. In careful English, she told the sheriff that Adeline was his wife by her own choice. She was free to leave if she wished, but she had chosen to stay. The other warriors of the tribe stepped forward, making it clear that any attempt to force her would be met with resistance. The sheriff, seeing Adeline's determination and the threat of violence, began to back away. Thomas's face turned purple with rage. He called her ungrateful, a disgrace to his name. He said she would regret this choice, that she would come crawling back when these savages showed their true nature. Adeline looked him in the eye and spoke words she had wanted to say for years. She told him that giving her away was the only good thing he had ever done for her. She thanked him for setting her free from a life of shame and loneliness. She had found more love and acceptance in this village than she had ever known in Cedar Ridge. Defeated and humiliated, Thomas turned to leave, but not before spitting on the ground at her feet. The sheriff and the other men followed, eager to leave before things escalated. As they rode away, Adeline felt the last chains of her old life break. She was truly free. That night, the village celebrated. They sang songs and told stories of Adeline's courage in standing up to her father. The women painted her face with symbols of strength and belonging. Chayton sat beside her, his hand finding hers in the firelight. He spoke to her in Lakota, words she now understood. He called her brave, beautiful, and his. The seasons turned, and Adeline's life with the Lakota continued to flourish. She became White Crow's apprentice, learning the healing arts and combining them with her grandmother's knowledge. She and Chayton grew closer, their partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection. When she looked at him, she saw a man who had never once made her feel less than worthy. When he looked at her, he saw a woman whose strength came not just from her body, but from her spirit. On a warm summer evening, as she worked beside the other women preparing for a feast, Adeline realized she had found something she never thought possible. She had found home. Not in a place, but in a people who accepted her completely. Her size, once her greatest source of shame, had become proof of her strength and ability to contribute to the tribe's survival. The little girl who had been mocked and ridiculed in Cedar Ridge was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth, who contributed to her community, and who was loved for exactly who she was. Chayton often told her that she was like the prairie itself, strong and enduring, beautiful in her vastness. She had learned to see herself through his eyes and the eyes of her new family. Years later, when traders would pass through and mention Cedar Ridge, Adeline felt no pull to return. That life belonged to someone else, someone who had believed the cruel words and accepted the harsh judgments. She had been reborn here, among people who measured worth differently. Her father had meant to punish her, to finally rid himself of the daughter who embarrassed him. Instead, he had given her the greatest gift imaginable. He had given her freedom, love, and a life worth living. The story of the white woman who chose the Lakota over her own people became legend in both communities. In Cedar Ridge, they spoke of her as if she had lost her mind, choosing savagery over civilization. In the Lakota village, they spoke of her as proof that courage and kindness could exist in anyone, regardless of where they came from. But for Adeline and Chayton, it was simply their story, one of two people who found each other across seemingly impossible divides. If this story of resilience and love touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to our channel for more tales from the Old West, and share your thoughts in the comments below.